If you're a prospective computer buyer in the early 1990s, you might well remember that consumers had choices back then. Not only choices as to what system to buy, but also what store you visited to check out your options. Whether you're checking out the selection at your local Kmart, CompUSA, or a mom and pop computer store, you'd find a selection of increasingly powerful systems with specs that would make the head spin of computer users from a decade previously. This Laser 486SX is exactly the kind of budget system commonly found in consumer electronics stores around 1991. We're going to check it out in our first look of the Laser 486SX3. Hey guys, it's Jacob with Vtech Retrospective, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Laser 486SX3. Unlike many systems we profile on this show, we had very specific plans for this one before we bought it. This gives us a little extra incentive to examine the internals in close detail. The problem with that is there's very little information about laser systems available, so there's going to be some detective work involved. We'll be relying on this detective work when we reconfigure the system for retrofitted hardware. You may be asking, why did we buy this system? Besides the interesting brand name, this is a rather standard system from 1991. Well, that's what we were looking for. We wanted a fairly basic 486 system with an interesting upgrade path, specifically to be used with our set of Windows for Work groups, which I unboxed here. A video of us setting up our Windows for Work group setup is in the pipeline. First things first, what do we know about this system? We know who built it. Laser is one of the many brand names common in the 1990s, associated with a holdings group from Hong Kong. This company was originally known as Video Technology Limited, although you'd recognize them by their later name, Vtech. Although you'd know them now primarily for their children's educational devices, like the V-Smile TV learning system, Vtech has a long list of products under its belt. The first being a 1977 Pong clone sold in markets in the US and Europe. The following year, Vtech began producing LED games, which were sold in Radio Shack stores under the Radio Shack name. In 1980, Vtech released a spelling and math game called Lesson 1, which was also sold by Sears as the Computron. In 1983, after the release of the Creative Vision console, Vtech began producing PC clones, followed by Apple II clones in 1985. PC clones were sold under several brand names, including Vtech, Laser, and Leading Technology, before the company exited the market altogether in 1997 due to competitive pressure. As I've said, our system is from around 1991, and unlike other budget systems of the time, it was not built using low-cost outsourced components. Vtech actually manufactured the majority of the parts, which is great for their tech support people, but not so great when you're trying to make changes and upgrades. Hardware compatibility was a relatively new concept in 1991, but fortunately, hopefully, these parts should be standard enough for our plans. Remember that 30 years ago, there was no online driver archive to scroll through, so it was necessary to be absolutely sure you had the manufacturer's floppy disk for your exact hardware. Worse yet, if you wanted to be a rebel and alter your system in an unsanctioned way, you also had to know how to load the correct device drivers in the autoexec.bat file and configure them in the config.sys file. You could easily pull your hair out and give up on life if you didn't know how to correctly configure something as simple as an AT-API CD-ROM driver. The IDE devices weren't configured correctly in this system, but there's a good chance that the existing hard drive is dead, so we may be hunting through archives to find device drivers for hardware, which is extremely hard to identify. So what's inside the case? It was common for budget systems of the day to employ the use of a riser for expansion cards. As it's configured, 3 slots are used, but the case itself isn't large enough to accommodate the plates for the external I/O ports in their usual vertical configuration. This case is configured so that the riser forms part of a support in the middle of the case, which gives it some substantial strength. While the motherboard itself doesn't contain many built-in features beyond the standard complement of IDE, FDD, serial, and parallel ports, it does have quite a few configuration options. The CPU itself is pretty hard to get at since it's covered by the ISA riser, but the board has sockets for both an upgraded CPU and a math coprocessor. This would have made the 486SX3 an attractive option for the computer literate who would have realized that much of the cost cutting on this system was done by way of processor selection. CPUs were very expensive in 1991. Companies like Intel maintained a pricing structure with a wide range of pricing and performance abilities, so buying a budget system with a handy CPU upgrade slot was a smart strategy. This particular motherboard is made even better because of its large number of RAM slots. RAM was also surprisingly expensive in the early 90s. The VESA local bus standard saw some action during the later days of the 486, but it didn't exist in 91. So these are 16-bit ISA cards at best. Graphics are managed by a Vtech card with a Trident chipset and up to 512 megabytes of VRAM. Our research indicates that it could support monochrome, EGA, CGA, and VGA, with resolutions of up to 1024 by 768. ATA 3366 didn't make the scene in time for the 486SX3 either. Fortunately, the system bus architecture at the time wouldn't really have been up to such speeds anyway. Onboard IDE ports are present, so we do have some good standard hardware as a starting point for storage. One of the other ISA cards is a modem, which appears to have come with the original system. The third ISA card is a sound card which supports wavetable synthesis. If such technology existed when this computer was manufactured, it would have been very new. Another apparent mismatch in technology is the hard drive. A 1.28 gigabyte Seagate drive like this one in our system would have been massive in 1991. So we're thinking it had been switched out at some point. The CD-ROM is a similar case, with an 8x read speed being very near state-of-the-art for the time. I've been referring to this system as a budget model, but actually it seems to be more of a mid-grade model, particularly when you look at the quality of the very beefy case. It's some pretty heavy steel, and even the clips for the plastic parts are completely undamaged. Some features common on newer systems could be seen in this case, such as drive rails. We're expecting some of this to change, but looking at our system as it stands, it's fairly well equipped. We picked it up for $65, which is probably what the actual raw steel in this computer is worth these days. The front of the system contains the indicator lights for power, turbo, and hard drive activity, the reset button, 3.5 and 5.25 inch floppy drives, and the 8x CD-ROM drive. The back is where you'll see the power switch, DC power input and output, covers for the 3 unused expansion slots, keyboard port, parallel ports, mouse port, VGA connector, RJ11 connectors for phone lines to the modem, a controller port, and audio I/O jacks. What does all that mean? Considering we purchased this system as a as-is, maybe repairable parts machine, it offers the opportunity to bridge a long technological time span by using aftermarket devices such as an IDE to CF adapter. This should allow us to not only use this system to prepare materials for first boots on other systems, but also provide a good platform for showing how the technology has progressed through the years. We should also be able to illustrate the advantages and challenges of the many retrofit devices on the market for vintage systems like this one. And now for the ratings. Rarity gets a 2 out of 5. This system is not that rare whatsoever, and to be honest, even if this particular one was, there are 1,000 other basic 486 systems out there. Price, I mean, considering we got it for $65 for a full 486 system is pretty good if it works. If not, $65 down the drain, oh well. So overall, we'll give it a 4 out of 5. Aesthetics, it's a beige box, 2 out of 5. For software, I'm probably gonna give this a 5 out of 5. You're gonna get full support for MS-DOS and for early versions of Windows, as well as going back to play some classic systems thanks to its turbo button. Ease of repair, well, I'm not going to give a rating on that one yet because we've got a lot of repair work to do on this system. And you're going to get to see that in future videos. So make sure to stay tuned till then, subscribe, give us a comment down below if you've ever used one of these systems, and make sure to join our Discord where we'll be posting updates about the system as it evolves, and I'll see you guys next time.